A looming urgent low with insulin on board in the middle of an Ironman event as a type 1 diabetic. How did I survive? We're going to get to that and more as I walk through every detailed blood sugar, diabetes dosing decision, and horrendous ideas that I had that narrowly helped me avoid death and actually finish my most recent Ironman race. It was an Ironman 70.3, and really to navigate this thing with 90%, actually about 95% time in range. Near perfect, almost non-diabetic numbers during an Ironman event, even though I felt like I narrowly escaped death. Now, if you don't know who I am, my name is Matt Van de Vecht. I am an Ironman, and I am also a type 1 diabetic who is a master fitness trainer and nutritionist, public speaker, and now best-selling author of a book called The Blood Sugar Freedom Formula. And I work with type 1 diabetics to gain their quality of life back, not really do the crazy stuff that I do with Ironman, but if you're interested in either of those, athletics or just living your best life with type 1 diabetes, you're going to want to stick around today because I'm going to be spilling every single detail from this race over the weekend and every scary story as well. Hope you enjoy. So, did I have an urgent low? I will get to that in this episode, I promise you, and I will detail the story because it is juicy. But before we do, I actually want to give you some history on the pre-event. See, last week's episode, I detailed a bit of the insulin resistance before the event. As you taper, you gain weight, there's stress involved, and blood sugars run a little bit higher, so I had to make some adjustments. But in addition to that, leading into the race, I had some tricky recalculations that I had to account for because of travel, because of food that wasn't ready on time, and chaotic race day and pre-race registration activities. So just all meals were on the go and at completely random times. It was a tricky day, to say the least. And this race that I did, it was an Ironman 70.3. While I have done a full Ironman, which is 140.6 miles, this was half of that. So it's still challenging, to say the least, but not as, well, it's hard in a different way. We'll say it's like that. So instead of just trying to survive and endure 140.6 miles, I was trying to go as fast as I can through 70.3 miles. So a little different, but in this race, my coach gave me the green light to hit it as hard as I could and to pursue a new personal record. And I'm very excited to say that I did accomplish that. I accomplished what I set out to do, and I got the finisher medal right here, which is always exciting. Yeah, woo, you get a medal. But more important than that, I actually broke my own personal record by over an hour. So in a race, that's a lot of time, right? I beat my last record by an hour and was able to do so without dying or going to the hospital. Because a few times during the race, I was curious if I would end up in the hospital based on what the blood sugars were doing. No, but what's important to recognize is that before we get into detailed dosing and all of that, everyone's insulin needs are very different. This episode and all of the content that I make does not serve as medical advice. If you need help with this kind of stuff, you should probably talk to your medical team, your doctor, or if we end up in a coaching relationship, because I do work directly with other type 1 diabetics like myself, then we can talk about what direct recommendations I might have for you in that relationship. But in a generic relationship like we have right now, where I'm talking to a camera, I don't know what you're going through, so what I'm about to say probably would not work for you, but it did work for me, mostly. We're going to get into the details behind that. Now, what I'm pumped to talk about is how well the blood sugars behaved, but I will say only on paper. The decisions required to make them behave, very difficult and counterintuitive. See, there's a number of strategies that I've utilized after hiring a coach, multiple coaches, but one of them is a type 1 diabetic who does this kind of stuff for a living. Like, this is his thing. And we consulted a while back and he gave me a bunch of really good ideas. And from those ideas, I expanded on those and added my own twist, of course, with my blood sugar formulas. So if you don't know, I use something called the 80-20 blood sugar formula. It's my it's my jam. It's the thing that has enabled me to not only live my best life, raising my daughter and having fun with my wife and pursuing Ironman events while running a business and writing a book, but it also allows me to do so with more peace of mind. And for me, that was a big deal. Mentally, I have not always been great. There's been some mental health struggles there in the past, including some PTSD from a time where I almost died from low blood sugar. And that actually did come back to haunt me during this race because I faced some similar situations. And it was during those situations I had these feelings rush back in, and I'm going to get to those towards the end, the scary situation I found myself in. But again, not medical advice, because I will be talking about dosing situations. This also serves as a documentation for me to myself. So Matt, if you ever get back into Ironman stuff and this actually wasn't your last race, then this video is going to have instructions on how to crush it once again. So without any further ado, let's get into it. Now, race morning, I woke up at 4:30 and I got broken sleep over the night before the race. Of course, it's hard to sleep when you're super pumped for a race coming up. But when I say broken sleep, I mean I woke up every 20 minutes on the dot. Yes, I really want you to understand how broken that was. Every 20 minutes with either a nightmare that I had been high all night, high blood sugars, and woke up with insulin on board from Control-IQ, which would throw off the entire calculation that I had laid out so meticulously and would throw off my race day. That was the nightmare that I would have. And the other reason I kept waking up is thinking it was time to go. So I'd wake up, hey, it's time to go. It's time to wake up. Oh, it's only 1 o'clock in the morning. 1:20 rolled around. Hey, time to go. It's time to wake up. Oh, it's only 1:20. It was just so killer. Anyways, blood sugars actually were perfect all night long. It was beautiful. Did not wake up high with a ton of insulin on board. I've done that before with one of my other events, and it really does make it hard when you start the race day off on a rocky foundation. No, so I woke up. My plan was to take some insulin, and I won't go into detail like what I ate and all that kind of stuff, but well, why not, right? That's what you guys are here for, the details. So for my body, I woke up, I ate 2 dates. Each date has about 5 to 6 grams of carbs. I've been testing this for the last 6 months, so I knew that's what I needed. To get me going, not make me feel too full, too sick, but also not wreck my blood sugars. It would take me from about 90 to 150, and that is where I wanted to be for the pre-swim. Now, in addition to that, I took 2 separate doses of 0.33, so 1/3 of 1 unit, and that enabled me to not only keep the blood sugars from going too high from the food, which I knew they wouldn't, but just in case. But more importantly, it would help to combat the stress, because I've noticed all of my races, I've started off higher where it starts to climb. At my Ironman Santa Cruz race, I noticed it climb over 200. That pissed me off because I had a whole plan for not doing that. In my Ironman California race, my full Ironman, it climbed and then leveled out at 179. So I was like, well, at least I'm technically still in range, right? This race, however, there's an added difficulty where there's a 2-mile walk from my hotel to the shuttles, and from the shuttles, a 30-minute bus ride. Now, why this is challenging is if I take insulin and then go for a walk, I will plummet, right? Insulin plus activity equals drop for most people. But then you're in a bus for 30 minutes, right? So it's like you don't want to drop beforehand and then have to treat a low and push it back up and then get on a bus and then sit there for 30 minutes and then start the race, because then you're going to be high. So I had some really tricky situations to navigate, and there was a calculation for that, but the secondary plan that I actually ended up using was calling in a favor. So I said, hey, Mom, since you're here at this race, can I buy you a Starbucks and you pick me up super early in the morning? And she was like, how early are we talking? And I was like, at the latest 5 a.m. She was like, oh my gosh, this is the last race, right? And I was like, yep, this is the last one, I think. So anyways, that solved that problem. I was able to take the insulin that I needed, got dropped off at the bus. I walked like 100 yards and then boom, on the bus, 30 minutes. While we're on the bus, blood sugars did start to rise. Stress kicking in. As we knew it would happen, right? So I watch it go from 130, 150, 160, 170, and I'm like, oh no, it's gonna get me. I'm gonna have a bad start. So I start doing some breathing exercises, just meditation, calm. I'm saying my prayers. If you don't know, I'm a Christian, so I find a lot of comfort in praying to God and mapping out my day with God. Like, God, this is what I'm looking for. This is my goals, and of course, part of my journey as well is to represent Christ well in my athletics. So, of course, I expect that people are going to be watching me for the example that I set. So it's a whole thing, right? Whole process in the bus that I'm going through in my head, trying to keep myself calm, deep breaths, and I watch it peak at 181, and that's when I stopped looking at it. I said, you know what? I'm not going to give insulin now. We're too close to the race start. I can't give insulin because whatever I give now will make me go low in the water, because I have a 1.2 mile swim in the water. So I'm like, you know what? If I can't give insulin for a high, I'm going to stop checking my blood sugars, because it literally doesn't do anything outside of stress me out more, right? If there's nothing I can do, let it go. And so I let it go, and got off the bus. We had another about 200 yards to walk to go from the bus to our transition to get our bike set up, our swim gear, to grab our wetsuit, because we had to decontaminate our wetsuits before going in the water, and took a look at my blood sugars then, and it was 163. I was like, oh, thank you, God. This is amazing. I was so excited. Starting to come back down to the point where I was like, it's a good thing I packed extra food. I had a whole bag of dates in my pocket, and I was like, do I get to eat more? This is exciting, but also like, don't go low. So there's always those conversations I have in my head of like, let's balance it out, find the fine-tuning moment. And what was really interesting is I think I found my balancing point. Now, granted, the plan itself could be fine-tuned. Technically speaking, you're supposed to eat breakfast, like actually eat breakfast. I had at most what could be considered a light snack, right? I had 2 dates. I had 12 carbs. No fat, no protein. That's a trashy way to start 6, 7, 8 hour race day, right? You need food. So if I were to continue optimizing this, I would figure out how to optimize for a full breakfast that also didn't make me go high or low and would give me a solid race start, so I could start the day feeling a bit more full. That being said, it is what it is. I felt fine. I've been training like this for years, and that's been the quote unquote breakfast, right? Snack of champions. No, but we get to the race start and blood sugars are cruising between 160 and 165. That's where they're going to be. I'm like, this is amazing. I should also note that when it hit 181, I did do one more thing that is slightly aggressive. And that was that I set a temporary basal rate on my insulin pump, not to reduce it, but to increase it. So I actually increased my basal insulin by 115%, or 15% above 100, right? So my basal rate temporary profile was 115%. That is actually what I had needed for the week leading into the race because of my taper. So I had gained a little bit of weight that made me more insulin resistant. I snacked on fat throughout the week that made me more insulin resistant. And I lowered my exercise. That made me less insulin sensitive. So I actually needed more insulin at a base level, at a foundation. And I was like, you know what? We're a little bit higher than I'd like to be. And I have needed this much insulin for the last week. Let's just set it and let it roll. See what happens. Worst case, I can turn my pump off and try and recoup some of that insulin on board, right? So that temp rate kept me perfectly even keel. It's a very wise / lucky decision that I made, and that was cool. So getting into the swim, you get all your gear ready, set up multiple bags for, this is where your towel and helmet and gloves and bike shorts go. This is where your bike goes. You're putting nutrition and everything together, stocking my bike, which is behind me, with a bunch of glucose gels and liquids and mixing all my sugar drinks and electrolytes and all that stuff. And then you get in line for the swim and you line up for how fast you expect to go. And I'm one of the faster swimmers, proud to say. A swim club when I was in high school and junior high paid off. So thanks, Mom and Dad. But we get there. And the nice thing that I've discovered after a few of these events is that when you're in line, they send out 4 athletes at a time. So 4 athletes go, they wait 5 seconds, beep, 4 athletes go, wait 5 seconds, beep. And it's because they used to do a start where thousands of people would go at once, people would end up getting trampled and would drown, right? There's thousands of people running into the water. So now they do 4 pause to try to space out the athletes a lot more. And the first 2 races that I did, I thought you had to just go, like you're required to. What I did this time, because I was like, I can always just pull the medical card, right? I get to the beginning, the start of the line, and right before I go into the water, I sidestep, let people pass me. I'm like, go ahead. And I eat my snack, take my insulin pump off, recalculated everything. And worst case scenario, I can go, it's medical, right? And they're not going to do anything. So I was like, I'm just going to do my own thing. This is my race, right? My race, my pace. And the clock has not started yet. It doesn't start until you enter the water. So I stop, I eat an RX bar, which is about 23 grams of carbs. It's 200 calories. That is my breakfast. Now I eat it immediately before entering the water. I've always done this because I don't want it to spike my blood sugars, but I also don't want to go low while in the water because I've run 115% basal rate up until the start of the race. So I've got a bunch of insulin that's still on board, right? And some residual insulin on board from earlier doses. So I do have to be cautious about this. Now my thought process behind it is that the fats and the proteins in the RX bar actually slow digestion down enough to avoid the spike. And by the time that food starts to digest in my stomach, because it is still a relatively fast digesting food, I'm already 15, 20 minutes into a swim burning glucose. So where I would have seen a drop is when the food starts to digest and start to cause a spike and they level out, right? So we get into the swim. It is ice cold. Not as bad as I expected, though, to be honest. Everybody talked about this swim being horrifically cold because it's out in the middle of the desert. And the desert gets into the 30s overnight. And then you have to get into the water. And so I've actually been training cold exposure therapy and training. I've been doing bay swims in the winter in my hometown and just getting used to the cold freezing showers every single day. And I believe that actually allowed me to acclimate and I did not feel cold. It was the first swim upon exiting the water that I was not hypothermic. So my other 3 races, I came out violently shaking, hypothermic, and it was a nightmare. Took a lot of time out of my race. This time I made it out. It went great. And on top of that, I entered the water and I had started to come down a little bit. So I was like a little nervous during the swim, wondering if I was going to go low because I entered the water at 151, right? So it's starting to cruise downwards. And I was like, shoot, was that temporary basal rate necessary or did I just shoot myself in the foot? I changed the plan on race day. You're not supposed to do that, right? I come out of the water after entering at 151, 130. Ooh, baby. I was so excited. I mean, I'll put a picture on screen. Literally was smiling ear to ear. It was like, it's like I wanted to cry because that's the best I've ever had. Usually I come out of the water and during races and I'm like 200 because I'm so stressed out in the water and everything. And came out at 130 and was like, we're on. It's on, baby. Like, this is the plan. It's working. And so I had a really quick transition. I wasn't hypothermic. I wasn't hyper or hypoglycemic. Everything was in place. And we hopped on the bike, took off. Now, part of my strategy on the bike is to take insulin so I can eat food. How much, how little? This I actually had a little bit of a gray area on. See, I figured out during my Ironman California, the full Ironman race, that's 140 miles, 140.6. You earn those 0.6 too, so I'm counting that. I learned that I need a ton of insulin to match up with how much food I'm trying to take on during the bike and during the run. I actually found out I require triple over the maximum recommendation of any insulin given during exercise, which is scary to give, right? Because you're like, I hope this works. So I pansied out. I didn't give the full amount that I had calculated because I was like, I'm at 130. Things are like too good right now, so I'm just not going to push the envelope. And so I gave, 1.33. And I had calculated 2 units that I was supposed to give. I gave 1.33 and entered into what started off as a great bike ride. Beautiful course, and about 40-ish minutes in, maybe 50 minutes, I realized I did not give enough insulin. So I had to give more than, which unfortunately is really tricky in a half Ironman because you don't have enough time to give second and third doses because it will overlap with the run segment. So you still have insulin on board. Remember I told you guys about the looming urgent low in the run? Yeah, we're going to get there. So during the bike ride, I had to make a decision, which was either take insulin, it works now but makes later more difficult, or don't take insulin. Now works good enough and you suffer later as well because you won't have had enough food and your body's going to shut down. So with these endurance events, it's really tricky to match that and do it as a diabetic, right? So ultimately made the decision that I needed more insulin, I needed to eat, and I was going to push it to the limit. Today was a day for me to race and to see how fast I could do this when properly fueled. So I took another third, it did nothing. Took another third, it did nothing. Took another 2/3. Now we're moving. Now we're eating, back on track with fueling. If you count that correctly, you are correct that it was 2.67 units plus my basal rate increase. So I was sitting around 3 total units of insulin given during a bike ride, which was more than I should have given, right? Because I calculated 2. This is the thing. If you are one of my clients, or if you've been following along, or if you've read the book, I don't have it next to me because we're actually traveling tomorrow. We're heading out to New York because the book hit bestseller status in 3 different categories. So they actually are going to be putting my face and the book up in Times Square on a billboard. So I get to go out there with my family and we'll take some pictures and post it on social media. It's really exciting. This book is helping a ton of people, which is more than I could ask for. So if you haven't gotten it yet, go grab the book. It's called The Blood Sugar Freedom Formula. You can search my name as well. Go grab it. Can't say I guarantee it'll change your life, but darn near close to guarantee as long as you read it and actually use it. So go check it out. The Blood Sugar Freedom Formula on Amazon. Now, what's interesting about the bike is that it started to work, it worked great, felt good, and actually hit a new PR. And there's a video I'll show on screen. Maybe we'll pause me for a second so you can listen. So you heard me say, I hit sub 3. And I was like yelling at my family because I was so pumped because I've never done that before. And the closest I've come was 30 seconds over that time. I just barely missed it in the last one. And so this time I was just like, I made it by like 6 minutes. You know, I really was flying on the bike. And really proud of that experience. And so came in, and the unfortunate part is that I did take a lot of insulin late in the bike. So there was still insulin on board. So I made up for that by shutting my pump off completely for the last 45 minutes of the bike. And during the whole bike segment, the beginning, when I noticed it wasn't working, wasn't enough insulin, crept up 180, 190, 203, I think was the highest it went, something like that. And then, you know, it came back down because I was giving insulin. It was only up there for maybe 15, 20 minutes. But that insulin was coming back to bite me in the butt. Now, the entire rest of the bike, I was cruising 130 to 150, I think it was. So very good range while eating a ton of carbs. We're talking like, how many was that? Probably close to 80 to 100 grams of carbs per hour. I'll have to go back and recalculate that. But, you know, we're sitting at like 200 something carbs over the course of the bike ride. But at the end of it, I still had insulin on board. Blood sugars were cruising in the 130s. So I knew I had to shut my pump off and make sure I didn't stuff myself too full and have a repeat of Ironman in California where my stomach stops digesting and forces food back up, right? That's not what you want, especially during a run because you're bouncing a lot. It's tough. So there's a lot of things to consider with these races, right? And so shut off my pump, 45 minutes, still eating sugar, another, I think like 30 or 40 grams of glucose as my pump is completely off and it's still just staying right there, nice and level. Real quick transition from bike to run. You change your clothes, your gear and everything and take off. And started the run with 25 carbs. 10 minutes later, 25 more carbs. 10 minutes later, 25 more carbs. Already, I can tell this insulin on board is kicking my butt. And it feels good at first because I'm getting to eat a lot and eating is necessary. You have to consume calories because you're burning calories, right? So it's helping me to maintain a strong pace. But unfortunately, the course was very hilly. We're running through a golf course, 2 loops, and the hills actually caused me to burn glucose faster. So I am burning glucose faster than I can consume carbs, even with my pump completely turned off. So it's an eating contest at this point. And I'm getting a little bit nervous because my blood sugars are sitting like in the 90s, and I'm just like, oh gosh, I can't eat anymore. Hopefully this works, right? And so a lot of I say this, my mantra during the race was it's fine until it isn't, right? Because I could feel the fear coming back in and I was like, you're going to go low. You're going to end up in the hospital. What if you go so low that they can't revive you? And I'm looking around, I'm like, there's no aid stations. There's no medical tents. It's a freaking golf course. There's nobody out here except other racers. Best case scenario, I tell somebody else, get help. And 20 minutes later, they'll find a medical tent. and then somebody 20 minutes later, so 40 minutes, comes to get me, I'm dead by then, right? So I'm just like spiraling in my head. I'm like, you're gonna die, while running and making things worse. I'm like, I gotta keep running because I want to break my own personal record, which is a sub 6 hour half Ironman. And previously the best I had done was just barely under 7 hours. So I'm like, if I'm trying to knock an hour off my time, I really need to attack this thing and not stop for blood sugars. So that's what I did. And for the first 10 miles of the run segment, it was great. Now what's interesting is that pump stayed off almost the entire time. What's tricky about that is that my blood sugars were between, I'd say 80 and 110 the whole time, right? I'm dumping glucose down my throat at this point. I was consuming about 125 grams of glucose per hour during the run. So a total of about 250 grams of sugar that I took on during the course of that run, which is insane. Elite athletes don't even do that. The fact that my stomach didn't fight me and throw everything up is a miracle from God. And I was praying the whole time because I knew I was playing a pretty risky game. But around mile, one more thing I need to mention. There's a challenge with insulin pumps where, yes, you can turn it off and that can help, but there's this thing called euglycemic DKA. Now, DKA, you've probably heard of diabetic ketoacidosis, where ultimately your blood turns acidic, right? And it's the lack of appropriate amounts of insulin. That can happen without high blood sugars. And a lot of people don't know that. So if I were to keep my pump off and just run like 3 marathons in a row, I would probably go into euglycemic DKA because I would have no insulin over the course of 15 hours or whatever. Hopefully not that long. 12 hours. We'll say 4-hour marathons, right? So I knew this. And the second my blood sugars got over 100, I would turn my pump back on for like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, just to get some insulin back in my system, because I knew even though I wasn't in a good spot to receive insulin, because I would plummet back down towards a low, I needed it to avoid going into diabetic ketoacidosis, or more technically euglycemic diabetic ketoacidosis. So very challenging. So I, for the most part, kept my pump off, and that was an aggressive move that I made. I knew I would pay for it later after the race, right, when it all catches up to you. But I knew that if I kept my pump on, I would be in an urgent low and I would not be able to finish the race, or at least not at a good time. So I chose to choose athlete over diabetic temporarily and just slight shift, right? That worked until mile 10. With enormous amounts of carbs that I had been taking in, my insulin pump shut off at this point for an hour and a half plus, had this insane drop in blood glucose that hit me immediately. I was cruising at 100, nice and stable, glucose, no insulin, glucose, and out of nowhere, blah, arrow down 82, arrow down 71, and I'm just like, what do I do? Right? There is no insulin in my system. Why is it plummeting right now? Is my CGM off? And as you'll see here, I'm actually wearing 2 CGMs, and they both were reading that plummeting blood glucose. So it's like, okay, it's correct, right? Like usually if it's wrong, one of them is right and one of them is off. So I knew I was going to have an urgent low if I didn't do something to fix it. And I know from my experience that while running, my digestion is slower than it is while walking. And walking is slower digestion than it is while sitting. So my thought was, I know based on my pacing, I am like a few minutes away from missing my mark, from missing my big goal. And if I stop for even 1 minute to fix these blood sugars, I could lose the opportunity to hit this immense goal that I've had for months. And I've been training super hard for it. So I had a decision to make. And as I'm watching it go down, every 5 minutes, I get a new update on the CGM, right? It hit 71 with an arrow down. And I was like, that's it. I don't think it's responsible of me to continue at this pace. And that for me was really difficult because I had a lot of fears coming back into my head from times when I did almost die from low blood sugar. And I was like, okay, at the rate that it's falling, it's going to be in the 50s soon. And then the next reading is going to be like 30s. I'm a dad now. I can't risk anything happening. Right. And so Made the decision to slow myself down to a walk, and thought that I was sacrificing my personal record, thought that I was sacrificing my superstar finish, and everything that I had worked for. And it was worth it. I prioritize my role as a dad and as a husband higher than my role as an athlete, obviously, but also as an influencer, as a thought leader, and as somebody who might inspire others in the world who live with type 1 diabetes. It was still hard, though. I didn't want to give that up, but I knew I had to be safe for my family. What blows my mind a little bit is that I had moved past my fear of lows in that moment. It wasn't fear as much as it was anger and frustration that my blood sugars were getting in the way. And I had all these thoughts flood my head, as I'm staring at a 71 arrowed down after I've consumed 75 grams of carbs and they've done virtually nothing. Like, let's just take that into consideration. My thought process is like, if I had 75 carbs and I've had no insulin for the last hour and a half, this might be the blood sugar that kills me, right? Like, apparently nothing is going to stop this thing. So I had to stop and walk. And I'm happy in a way to say that it feels like I conquered fear in that moment. That's something that previously would have stopped me in my tracks, and I would have chosen anything over a low blood sugar. So happy about that. But I stopped to walk just for a little bit, hopefully let the sugar digest a little bit, and digest it did as anticipated. The science is there. These are things that I know, things that I teach my clients. Literally like 2 minutes of walking. And I was like, okay, if I sprint the rest of this race, maybe I get sub 6. So let's at least pick up the pace. Let's get back into a run. 2 steps into my run and my legs locked up. Because I had stopped and walked, my legs began to, shift into recovery mode. And they were like, nope, we're not going to work anymore. So massive cramps, foot, ankles, calves, quads, hamstrings, everything is just locking up and like seizing. And it hurt so bad. And I was so angry at my blood sugars because I was like, if I didn't have type 1 diabetes, I would make that cutoff. I would have finished in my set goal. I am the athlete that is capable of those things, but diabetes is holding me back. And I was so angry at my diabetes. And I started making these excuses of like, I got to tell people that diabetes held me back. I totally could have done it, right? And ego is kind of getting in the way at this point. And I was frustrated, but then I realized that I had a choice to make in that moment, that even though my body was locking up, was fighting me and did not want to let me go, it was breaking down, right? I had been pushing very hard for this entire race because I wanted to hit that new personal record. I had a choice where I could sink into that moment, let it be the reason that I give an excuse. I've got a good excuse. I was heading towards an urgent low. You had to slow down. You had to be safe for your family, right? Or I could tell people that diabetes tried to stop me, and I chose that whether I would get the outcome I set out to get or not, I was going to give it 100% of my effort. That even if I didn't make the cutoff that I was aiming to hit, that I was still going to give every ounce of effort in that race. And that I would walk off of that race course proud of my efforts, proud of who I am and the athlete that I showed up to be, despite having blood sugars that made it more difficult than anybody else on that race course, right? There's a chip on your shoulder you can carry with you. It's harder for me, so if I accomplish the same thing, mine counts more. So I decided to push through it. Picked it up into a jog. Okay, I can maintain this. My body is okay. Every step is immensely painful, and I can feel I am an ounce away from absolutely locking up into complete cramps and not being able to use my legs. So I find the pace that I'm able to max out at, and I hold that pace, and knowing that if I push any harder, legs are done, you will not finish the race. If I go less, you're not going to have any chance at finishing under 6 hours. But if I can hold that pace, I might get a couple minutes over 6 hours, and that's still pretty cool, right? And I'm going to give my best effort. That was mile 10 to mile 11. At mile 11, with 2.1 miles to go, ran a quick calculation in my head, looked at my watch, checked the time versus my time that I started the race, and realized if I went into an all-out sprint, I could still finish under 6 hours. I could still hit my goal. And I could do it in the midst of challenges, in the face of adversity. Oh man, my drive kicked into high gear. Now, one thing I did not share that happened before the race, it actually happened the night before the race. My daughter came up to me, unprompted, and she said, "Daddy," and I was talking about my race, right? Talking about, she could probably tell I was a little stressed. She came up to me and she goes, "Daddy, you can do it." And I was like, "What? You little angel?" And I said, "What did you say?" She said, "You can do it, Daddy." And I about lost it. My wife looked up at me and was like, I could see she was tearing up too. It was like, well, now I have to do it. Now I have no excuse. I will, Brooklyn. And I told her, I was like, I will. My goodness. And I mean, how blessed am I, right? She's amazing. My whole family's great. My parents were out there. My wife was there. The support they give me is just unparalleled. It's amazing. But she goes, "Daddy, you can do it." And so in that moment, her voice in my head, knowing there's a chance I could hit a sub 6 hour half Ironman, the thing that like seasoned Ironman athletes are like, okay, yeah, that's actually a pretty respectable time, right? I realize it's possible, and I hear her voice in my head, "Daddy, you can do it." And I just dig deep, which is another thing my dad used to tell all of us kids growing up in sports is dig deep, right? And I just felt like a fire lit under my butt. I'm going, blood sugars, by the way, not behaving. So at mile 11, or maybe 10 and a half, they went from 71 to 73 to 75 to 77, 84, 96, 83, 91. So it's just like hovering 80s and 90s, right? And kind of dip into the 70s. And the insulin never went back on, by the way. Insulin pump's still off. And I'm consuming enormous amounts of glucose. So at this point, I've got less than 2 miles left in the race. And I'm like, okay, if I sprint this, that means we've got, enough time where I could put myself in a dangerous position with blood sugars, but I think we can make it. And worst case, you have an urgent low at the finish line, and there's people there that can help you, right? They can, I don't know, like take you away in a helicopter maybe. So I've got this deal I'm making myself in my head where I'm like, all right, if you go fast enough, you might get the time, and you'll be surrounded by medical professionals who can help you. Because I remember seeing ambulances at the finish line earlier in the day. I'm like, all right, it's a win-win, right? Blood sugars aren't cooperating, but you know what? They can save you probably. So I just lit up, all out sprint. And there's this song that every race that I have, there's a new mantra and a new song. And the mantra for this race was, "It's fine until it's not." So this was on the bike where I kept giving insulin and it was making me nervous. And I was like, you know what? It's fine until it's not. You're going to keep doing this until things just fall to pieces. And they never did, thankfully. On the run, I was like, okay, you have insulin on board. You keep dropping. It's fine until it's not. Just keep going. It's fine until it's not. Trying to beat my own fear, right? Because I'm scared of lows. I really hate them. I was like, it's fine until it's not. And then it wasn't, right? Mile 10, I was like, shoot, it's not fine. I need to stop. And then the song that came to mind after my daughter's voice got into my head of, "Daddy, you can do it." This song that I've been listening to, the chorus is "I Will Conquer." And it's a heavy metal song, so it's probably not something most of you would like, but the chorus is this deep, throaty, like screamy voice where it's, "I will conquer." And I'm just like screaming that in my head while I'm sprinting. Massive pain shooting through my legs. There are on the verge of cramping every single step. I can hardly move. I feel like I'm being taken over by rust, right? Like my whole body is just locking up and it's excruciatingly painful. Blood sugars, they're starting to creep back down again. And I'm like, eat more sugar, just keep going. You can do this. I glance at my watch. I know I've got somewhere between 10 and 30 seconds of grace, where if I stop running for 10 seconds, I'm probably not going to make it. So I am just all out hauling butt for a mile and a half. I see my mom with less than probably a quarter mile to go. And I didn't know this, they had been tracking my pacing, she saw that I was on pace to finish. They watched it go from, oh, he's totally going to make it, to, oh, he's not going to make it when I had to stop, right? To then, he might make it. And so she yells out while she's chasing me down, make this your best race ever, which I guess was apparently code to be like, you can do it if you hurry, right? I didn't know that. I thought she was just being encouraging. And I'm sprinting. I probably looked like I was pissed off because my face, I was just experiencing so much pain. Like, just running all out and passing people. And it was electric. I get to the final, so they call it the finisher's chute, where it's red carpet, all the Ironman stuff's laid out. And I am bolting down the finish line knowing I could be seconds away from missing this goal. There is not a chance I am leaving an ounce of effort on that race course, giving it everything I've got. I throw my arms out, scream, and this is actually coming from one of our Renegade Warriors in the Warriors Tribe Plus community. They called it this, the Renegade Roar. Just as I crossed the finish line, no idea if I got it or not, but knowing I left everything on the course, blood sugars did not stop me, and I broke down. I was bawling. It was so emotional that I gave it everything I had, and that I did not let diabetes hold me back. Oh my gosh, I was ecstatic. It was huge. I saw my wife at the finish line. She was starting to break down in tears, and she said, Matt, you did it. And I'm like, I know. And she's like, no, you did it. And I'm like, what do you mean, right? Because I can't see my time. They don't show your time until you cross the finish line, and then it's behind you. So it hits me, and I'm like, what do you mean? I did it. And we're like 20 feet apart, right? And she's like, you did it. And I hold up my fingers to show the number 6. And the whole world stops moving in this boat. I hold them up and I'm like, 6? I mouth the word because she's behind a gate, so she can't get to me, right? I'm in the finisher's area. And I'm like, 6? And she goes, yeah. And then I point down like under 6. And I could see like her face kind of quiver a little bit. She goes, yeah. And immediately I'm just bawling, right? Like right now I'm getting choked up too, because it was a movie magic moment. And I look back at the timing chip, and it shows that I was 5 hours, 59 minutes, and 5 seconds. I had less than a minute, and I would have missed my goal, which means if I had not given every single ounce of effort, I would have missed. And I would have never been able to get that back. I cannot tell you the amount of emotions that I was overcome with in that moment, but I can tell you that I collapsed to the ground. I could not move. I was physically exhausted, but more so emotionally overwhelmed. I did it. And blood sugars did not hold me back. In fact, I overcame the blood sugars mentally and physically. They held me back, and I still overcame. And I want to share that message with any of you watching this as well. You might not have Ironman on your bingo card for this year coming up, but you are capable of greatness. And it's so easy for us, as I did in the race, to let diabetes become an excuse. To be that thing where we're like, you know what? People would say it's okay because diabetes is hard. They get it, right? And they do. And it is hard. But it doesn't mean it has to be the end. It doesn't mean that you have to give in. And we're all given that choice. In fact, the other phrase that comes to mind, I don't have my original hat. I usually have it right next to me. Actually, I've got all these Ironman hats now, but I'm pretty sure I have my original. So we got Ironman. Here we go. My original Renegade Warrior Think Differently hat for my first Ironman event. The back of the hat says "Feed the Warrior." It's just something I've been saying for a long time. Anytime we face a challenge, we're given two choices. You can feed the warrior, dig into the challenge and choose to fight it, to overcome it, or you can feed the weakness, lean into the excuses. And I almost did. But in this moment, I chose to feed the warrior. I overcame. So I connected with my wife, and we both just embraced it. It was the same emotion, I would say, different circumstances, but same emotion to finishing my full Ironman about a month ago. And just this immense gratitude washing over me, as I thank God. I was praying the whole time, singing praises. When I race, I get really emotional and just overwhelmed with gratitude that I have a body that can do this, that I have a mind that's willing to push the limits, that I have the finances to pay for race fees and travel and have a business where I'm able to take a week off. And I have amazing clients who understand that I'm not going to be there for a coaching call because I'm signing in for another race registration. I am so overwhelmed with gratitude. And these events have meant so much to me. They've enabled me to see who I am at my core. And I'm happy to say that I am proud of the man that I am. You really get to know yourself in the deep, dark moments in those races when you're faced with some really intense challenges, right? I don't know if I'm going to be returning to Ironman events anytime soon. I'm sure I'll do another one at some point in my life. But Ironman Indian Wells La Quinta was my perfect race. I could have gone faster if blood sugars weren't an issue. And yeah, that's a little disappointing, right? But it was my perfect race. It gave me a chance to face my fears with blood sugars, right? A looming urgent low with insulin somewhere on board. Question marks going up into my head. How low will I go if I've had 75 grams of glucose and nothing happened? I'm still dropping, right? I got a chance to face my fears, overcome some mental demons, to push my physical limitations beyond what I ever expected to, and to still come out on top, to still break a sub 6 hour Ironman 70.3. I'm blown away. I'm a lucky guy. And at the end of the race, I was reconnected with my family and my daughter, again, unprompted. She comes up to me, and I thought for sure my wife had put her up to it, but my wife didn't. My wife didn't even know she was doing this, but she ran up to me and said, "Daddy, you're an Iron Man." And I coached her to say that a month ago at my official long distance Ironman, the Ironman 140.6. And she remembered, and she said it unprompted, "Daddy, you're an Ironman." And just, I start getting choked up. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, come here. I need to give you a hug." And seeing my parents, they've been to every race. They've followed this entire journey. I've called in so many favors with my parents for babysitting and for getting help with training, and saw them and just let out a roar. Like, we did it! Sub 6. What a strong finish. And my mom said something that I totally agree with, which was, God didn't have to give you that sub 6, but he did. And I thought that's so true. So this is also a reminder to you, to myself, to take moments to recognize how good life is. There are plenty of things I could have said, "Oh, it was a terrible race. There's so many bad things that happened." That I didn't even talk about. There were immense challenges that I overcame in that race. Many of them blood sugar related, but not all of them. And yet, it's so much more beneficial to focus on the positive, to focus on what went right, what we have to be grateful for, and how grand life truly is. So, the race overall, what a beautiful day. It's something I try to remind my daughter of as often as I can. I tell her, today's going to be a great day. even on days where I'm stressed out to the max. I start the day by telling her that. I want her to know that you can frame a day however you want. So why not frame it positively? What a blessing this has been. This is a long episode, so thanks for sticking around till the end. I kind of got off my horse there. All right, well, let's finish it up with some blood sugar. So the pump being off about 2 hours during the run, finished the race at 95 milligrams per deciliter, and it stayed between 95 and 125 until I consumed food. Then I shot to 250, had a rough time bringing it down. I actually stayed around 200 to 250 for the next 3 hours because we were road tripping through the desert and I was nervous to go low. So I was very cautious with delivering insulin, and as such, the high stuck around for many hours. Went to bed at 170, I think it was, a lot higher than I would like to be, and my insulin pump had to deliver a bunch of insulin because I passed out with my pump in my hands before delivering a final correction. It overdosed corrections in Control IQ, shot me down into an urgent low because I was so exhausted from this. My mom actually called me 4 o'clock in the morning, or 4:45 it was, asking me if I was okay. I was like, I had no idea. I slept through all the urgent low alarms because I was so tired, and she was able to wake me up with the phone call, thankfully. So my wife was in the other room with my daughter, and fixed the urgent low, got back up the next day, didn't dose for most of my breakfast, stayed perfectly in range, and it was crazy. But if you guys have more questions on that, let me know. Always happy to share the experiences. And if you want more info on the book, highly recommend it. Go check out thebloodsugarfreedomformula.com. Actually, the Blood Sugar Freedom Formula on Amazon.com, and read some of the stories I threw in there from previous Ironmans. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Be sure to leave a comment if something stood out to you, and I hope you find the joy in today. And keep up the fight.